Do it. Okay, we're good.
Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to the first Hack Mobile workshop on React Native. I'm Garrett. I'll be teaching part of this, and I'm with David as well. Right, so the slides are right here, acmurl.com/reactnative-slides. So these slides are kind of special. You navigate through them with the arrow keys or the space bar. So yeah, that's kind of cool. And then checking code is mobile app. So I'll leave this up for like a little bit in case you want to get the link, or someone could just paste the link in chat. That'll be great too. Yeah, all right. So don't forget to check in. Checking code is mobile app, all lowercase. I think that's right. The cool thing is you can actually click on this button and it'll like take you to the check-in. So I'm just going to do that right now because, oh wait, the code didn't work.
Oh no, did they not configure the code?
Uh-oh.
Oh, it said it worked for you? Let me give it a shot. Oh, it worked for me.
Okay, I guess I'm just special. All right, well, that's okay. Anyway, oh, this is okay. All right, well, I'm glad it works for everyone else. Yeah, but you can click this button too, and it'll go directly to the ACM portal and check you in. So yeah, check in, get your points. They're actually worth something now. The ACM store is out, so that's kind of cool. Anyway, really quick about these slides. I made these slides using something called MDX Deck. It's basically a way of using Markdown and React to make cool presentations like this. So you just use the arrow keys or spacebar to go between them. These slides are not responsive, so if you try looking at this on your phone, it's going to look really ugly, so don't do that. CSS is hard, so just use them on a 16:9 screen, a regular desktop. Anyway, let's just begin. So a quick introduction. What is React Native? Right. So React Native is a framework for building native mobile apps with React. So to explain some terms here, if you're not familiar, native apps run directly on your phone or tablet rather than from the browser. So think of like the Instagram app, right? Downloading it from the Play Store or the App Store versus going to Instagram.com on your browser, right? The Instagram app is a native app rather than a web app. And React is a JavaScript framework for building user interfaces. React specifically was originally designed for web development, but React Native lets you use React code to build native apps. So that's sort of what we're getting at here. And there's a few reasons why we want to do this and why this is good. So why React Native? Well, first of all, the current mobile development landscape is not really that great. So Android, I think as we talked about like right before the workshop, it's very hard. It can be kind of finicky, requires in-depth Java or Kotlin experience. So honestly, I personally don't like it that much. And it's just kind of difficult to get started with. And then iOS is limited to Mac. So you need a Mac to develop iOS because of Xcode and the Apple SDK and all that. So that's obviously expensive, right? Because most Macs are not cheap things that you could just buy. And lastly, Flutter here, it's a very promising new technology, but it's also very new. So support for it is not that great at the moment. But it's been out for a while, so it's kind of starting to mature a bit, which is nice. Right, and then reasons for React Native. It's generally easier to grasp, especially for people coming from web development, right? Because you're just translating like React code into native code. And you get access to the amazingness of NPM. So if you don't know what NPM is essentially this library of JavaScript packages. It's an entire ecosystem of like pre-built code that you could use. And it's cross-platform too. So ideally, you can write one code base for both iOS and Android. So rather than having to develop like an iOS app and then make an Android app separately, like two separate projects going at the same time, you theoretically can do one code base for all of React Native. And I say theoretically because in reality, it's not that simple, but for the most part, you can keep it to be one code base. Right, so I think I'll pass it off to David to give a quick React crash course. Just to, for those of you unfamiliar with React.
Cool. Give me just a sec to pull it up on my screen. Okay, Garrett, do you know how to full screen it, by the way? It's just F11.
Yeah, F11, and then like that.
Cool, got it. All right, so we're gonna do a quick crash course on React for those of you guys who aren't too familiar. We'll start off with going over Jsx and components, talk about props and state, and then we'll do a brief intro to hooks. Cool, so first we'll talk about Jsx and components, the building blocks of React. So before you learn about JSX, we're going to talk about what components are. Basically, components are reusable snippets of code that you don't really need to like copy paste in a bunch of different places. I kind of like to think about it like functions, like you can use these components in different places in your code and they'll have the same purpose. But in React, everything is a component. So it allows you to compartmentalize functionality and also visuals into like an easy to reuse way. And they're basically the building blocks of like what your React mobile application, or I guess React application would look like. So how can we write components? In React, we can write components with JSX. So basically JSX is like a JavaScript, like HTML sort of like combination is like how I would think about it. As you can see here, we have a little example of like what a component would look like. We have an import line and also a functional component. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth in a couple slides, but this is the basics and like a very bare bones example of what a component would look like. First, we'll talk about class-based components. So this is the older style of components that aren't as commonly used nowadays. Some people still prefer to use them, but typically a lot of people do functional components, which we'll talk about in a couple slides. But class-based components are pretty easy to understand if you've worked with like Java before, other object-oriented languages like C++, for example. They're a bit more tedious to write in terms of like syntax. You need to write a little bit more to write class-based components. And eventually they'll be deprecated from React because we have functional components now, which are like the newer, more advanced versions of components. So to give a quick example of what a class-based component looks like, here is something similar to what we had before. Again, we have like the import React line. As Garrett said in the chat, you don't really need to do the import React line anymore. So even if you exclude that, it's not really necessary. But yeah, here is the syntax for class component. We'll start off with like a class declaration, just like a regular class. You'd extend the React component feature, so you're just telling JavaScript that, okay, we're going to be making a React component specifically. And in every component, you need to do a render. So render is basically just telling what your compiler what you're actually going to be outputting and returning to your web application. So in this case, we'll be returning something. We'll be returning a div with two headers, an H1 that says React is cool, and an H2 that says, or is it? So one thing also that's important to know when you're returning in a component is you need to either have it in a div, or you can also just have it in empty brackets. So what that means, you can do like open bracket, close bracket without any div inside of it. But it needs to be compartmentalized in like a single tag, if that makes sense. Also, before I move on, does anyone have any quick questions before I move on to functional components? If not, I'll just move on to that next. Okay. If anyone has any questions, I'll answer them as we go. I'm going to move on to functional. Okay, so functional components are the newer and cooler way to write components. As Garrett says, class components are boomer React. So, if you're an old head and you want to write things the old way, I guess you could do class components. But if you're a cool Gen Zer, you can get on the wave and do functional components. So it's a very basic form of a component. And essentially like what a functional component is exactly what it sounds like. It's a function that'll return some sort of JSX. So here's an example of what we wrote before would look like as a functional component. So you can see we're not declaring example as a class anymore. It's just a const. It doesn't have to be a const. You can do like let example or var example. You can really just declare any sort of JavaScript variable. And what you're doing is you're setting it equal to a function. So this is called arrow notation in JavaScript if you're not familiar. Essentially, this is just like the parameters you'd give to a function. So if you want to pass anything in like props, which we'll cover in a few slides, you do that here. This arrow indicates like, okay, this function's body is going to be what's contained in here. And here is what our function actually returns. So in this case, we're returning the same thing we did before, a div with 2 header tags. So as you can see, it's a bit more like simple, although it's like kind of confusing to look at when you haven't, worked with functional components that much before, or if you haven't like done nested functions and variables. Once you get used to it, it kind of just makes sense and it gets easier over time. So someone asked me privately that does the variable const do anything? So at this point, like, no, it doesn't. This is just like storing this like functional component in this variable. So kind of similar to like storing anything in a variable. You won't actually like see what's inside of the variable until you do something with it. So that would be covered with exports, which we'll cover in the demo. Garrett will cover that for us. But yeah, this is the very basic syntax of what a functional component would look like. Cool. And yeah, this is just showing the difference between class and functional component. All right, so kind of covered this a little bit before, but like why worry about the distinction? So in the old days, class components had some other features that made them more convenient to use than functional components. Specifically, there was like lifecycle methods with which would allow you to basically specify like what would be rendered before you render your web app or your component, and then what would be rendered like after you're done with your component. You'd be able to control that with class components, not with functional components. And you can also keep track of state, which is like a way of maintaining data. So say you want to like keep track of some sort of counter or like a clock or something like updates over time, or like something that updates when you press a button. You wouldn't be able to do that with a functional component before. However, in I think it was JS6 in the newer version of JavaScript, they added basically features that, ES6, thanks, Nick. They added hooks, which allow you to basically do all the things that class components were able to do before. But now you can put them in functional components, and it just makes your life way easier. So since that was added in ES6, it's kind of the new wave, and now everyone likes to use functional components instead. Okay, so next up, we'll talk about props and state. So these are, the most powerful features of React. One of the main reasons why people use React is because of using props and state, allowing you to make JavaScript a bit more object-oriented and like syntactically clear. So first we'll cover props. So props are just properties. Think about it like parameters or arguments you'd pass into a function. Just like any other coding language you may have worked with, you can use props to pass in data into your components. So in this example, we have a variable called news article. And the props for this news article variable is title, date, and text. And basically, we have these squiggly brackets, surrounding title, date, and text, basically telling JavaScript that like, okay, the first variable, we're gonna name it title. The second variable we pass in, we're gonna name it date. And the third one, we're gonna name it text. So there's another way of doing this without doing the squiggly brackets, but I think like the common standard for doing this is doing this in the squiggly brackets, just so you don't have to like rename your variables. It'll just immediately say like whatever you pass in first is gonna be the title, whatever you pass in second is gonna be date, or pass in third is gonna be text. So it just makes things a bit easier when you're actually working with your code, because then you can do cool stuff like this, where you just put in title here, date, and text. One thing you also have to note is like when you're using variables in JSX, you also need to use the squiggly brackets inside of the tags you're using. So think about it, if you use like pointers, like dereferencing in a sense, you're just taking like what's inside the title and rendering it right here inside of like the h1 tag. or taking what is stored in the date and rendering inside of the h2 tag. So that is very basic introduction to props. If anyone has any questions about that, feel free to ask, but I'm going to move on to state. So cool. So state is the way you can keep track of specific data. This is data that can change over time. So you want to use state when you're updating something on your front end that you'd want to keep track of, and that might change over the course of your web app as someone uses it. So for the use state hook is like one of the most common hooks you'll use. You'll use the use state hook in functional components typically to keep track of updates, things that change for variables that you want to keep track of. In this case, so we have another example where we have a functional component cookie. We've abstracted away the render and stuff like that. But here's like the top of this function. Usually it's declared at the top of the functional component, where we'll have two things. So we'll have clicks in this case, and set clicks. So it's important that when you're doing use state, you also have these two different variables, one for actually storing, I guess, the count or whatever you're storing inside of here, like the state. And this is like a setter method. So if you use JavaScript, just think, I guess like Java, I like to think about this like a setter method where whenever you want to update what the clicks are, you'll use set clicks to do that. And if you're confused about that now, don't worry about that too much. Garrett will cover that a bit more in the demo. But all you got to know is clicks in this case stores the actual number of clicks, and set clicks is like a setter variable that will help you like update. Yeah, so set clicks is actually a function, not a variable. In this case, we're setting equal to use state 0. And so whatever you pass in here as the parameter for use state is going to be your default value. So in this case, when you first render this component, what's going to be stored in clicks is 0. It doesn't have to be a number. It can also be like a Boolean statement, for example. So you can do like use state true if you wanted to keep track of that. There's a bunch of different, I guess, types of values that you can store inside of a state tracked variable. But we'll talk about that also a bit more in the demo. Yeah, and if you don't understand state, I know it's a bit confusing to grasp at first. It took me a little while to kind of wrap my head around it, but I think once you use it and you actually apply it in a setting, it all kind of comes together after a little bit. Cool. And then lastly, we'll talk about hooks. So use state, as I mentioned before, is a hook. But hooks are one of the most powerful features of React, especially in functional components. It's a newer feature, but it allows you to keep track of certain features that may update over time, and allows you to like hook into your web application. So yeah, use state is an example of that. And you can also write your own hooks that you can keep track of. So in this case, like use effect is a common hook as well. This is a hook that's used to update your component when it's first rendered or when it's de-rendered or at different points when like variables update inside of your component. Seems like the use state hook is just a class component with extra steps. Yeah, maybe a little bit. I don't know, maybe Garrett can answer that for you, but
I want to say that the opposite is that class component is just the use state hook with extra steps. That's just me.
All right, well, it seems like an interesting debate. But anyway, moving on. Use effects is important because when you want to update like a variable in your code and you want to like change what's shown to the user, for example, you want to use effects to update that. Or when you like first render your component, you want to basically like figure out, okay, what do I want to show to the user? Or when you de-render it, like what do you want to make disappear? That kind of stuff. So show the next slide, basically like how you would do that. Typically use like a dependency. So in the case before, we had like the count for the use state. Let's say like we iterate the count by 1 and we want to like display something different on the screen. We can make this dependency count in this case. So this is a dependency list or a dependency array. And when anything in this array updates at all, this use effect function will execute and either like, yeah, it'll re-render your component, and you can basically do anything you want to your component whenever this dependency changes. So it's super useful for when you want to do quick updates to your web application in sort of like an object-oriented way. But yeah, it's important to know to like use your dependencies properly if you want to re-render your application at the right time. And yeah, as I mentioned here, if it's an empty array, so if you don't have anything here, you just have this like single argument as a function, then you don't need to worry about specifying a dependency. You can just like have it render when you first render your component. Cool. All right. I think we could pause for a sec for any like quick questions if you guys want. Otherwise, we'll have Garrett also start working on the demo of the web application or mobile application we're going to build.
Ustate doesn't let you pass callback functions. What do you mean?
Like you can't pass a callback function into it. You have to use a use effect with a dependency array. But like Boomer React lets you pass in like another callback function into the set state.
To like run after set the state?
Yeah, so like it used to work the way on like class components where if you had used this dot set state, you could like pass in another function that would run after the state was set automatically. But now you have to use effect for that.
Garrett, are you there? Your webcam
So
completely froze. Oh, he's lagging. Are you back?
Hello?
Hi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, that info destroyed you, Garrett. I can hear you now, Garrett. You're good.
Is my webcam active or no?
It's active. Maybe try turning it off for now. I think your internet's kind of lagging.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. Oh yeah. So callback functions. So yeah, the way that React like nowadays works, that you have different state variables and then different essentially different use effects for how you want that state to change the component. And it's just a different way of doing it, considering you now don't have to worry about things like, you know, component did mount, component will mount. Like, it's kind of like a lot of people do it this way. So you have to write these lifecycle methods instead of having it depend on different states instead. So yeah. Do we download Expo app on your? So if you want to try running your app locally, you have to download the Expo app just there on your phone. And eventually you'll do something to like, I guess some spoilers, you'll be scanning a QR code to get the app to deploy onto your phone, which is kind of cool.
All right, Garrett, do you want to take over from here?
All right.
I think your
Yeah,
lag's sort of going away.
All right, cool. Yeah. Right. Okay. Y'all can see my screen. I'm just going to assume yes. So anyway, live coding. We'll be building an app. So this is the fun part. A very simple but ugly note-taking app, because I am not a front-end developer. So here it is on demo. So here it is. It doesn't look that good, but you know, this is for demonstration purposes. All right. So notes, you have notes here. If you want to create a new note, it can be whatever. You can save that note. And then if you want to edit the note, you can change it to be something else. Save it and it'll save. So this is just a really basic, essentially this is a CRUD application. I don't think, not quite, you can't delete notes, but so it's a CRUD application, create, read, and update. And this is typically a pretty like standard kind of structure for like really basic apps to kind of demonstrate the features of React Native. So yeah, before we begin, so this is kind of answering some of the questions about setup. So if you want to follow along locally, then you should download Node Js and Npm here. So that's in this link here. Hold on, how do I unfull screen? Okay. So if you go here, then there's going to be different installs for your operating system. And Node.js essentially is this, let's see, it's this, it's like a library, a JavaScript library that allows you to run like JavaScript like anywhere, basically. I don't really know how to explain it. But Node.js comes with NPM, so you're going to need that. And then you can install Expo. You need to install Expo on your computer and on your phone if you want to run it on your phone. So npm install -g Expo. The -g just means you're installing it globally. So this will install Expo on your computer, and then you should have an Android or iOS device or an emulator handy if you want to run the actual app. And the starter code is right here. So essentially here is all of the starter code to be filled in during the workshop. The solution branch has the solution code if you want to look at that, but we're not going to look at that. So yeah, if there's any questions on how to set this up, feel free to ask. All right, so if anyone is setting that up, I'm just going to kind of move on and talk about some React Native specific stuff. So React Native components. So React Native uses a slightly different set of components. And these are native mobile components instead of web-based components. So rather than doing things like divs, you're going to be doing views instead. So this is dependent on native Android and iOS components. So React Native has already done this for you, where they kind of abstracted away the whole build process. So if you write a view or a scroll view, they will end up translating to their Android or iOS counterparts, depending on which thing you compile to. So here's basic conversion of some like really commonly used components. So view is a div, but it doesn't scroll. If you want to scroll, then scroll.
Hey, Gary, you're kind of lagging out again. Might want to turn off your webcam for a little bit.
So in this case, just regular text. Okay. That's this today. But yeah. So seeing some of those in the action. What Expo running and developing React app. Don't have to. Oh, am I lagging out?
You're lagging out pretty bad right now.
That is unfortunate. Just give me a sec.
All right, in the meantime, if anyone's having trouble,
I'm gonna stop share.
Oh, okay. If anyone has trouble installing anything, feel free to message me privately and I can try to help out.
All right, can people actually hear me?
I can hear you, I think. I just don't know how bad the delay is.
Okay. Can people hear me now?
Yeah, Garrett, I can hear you, but your camera's frozen
Oh,
and you sound like a robot.
I'm gonna rejoin the meeting. I'm gonna.
Okay. Okay, I've gotten some questions about Expo. So if you guys are having trouble installing Expo, you just have to get it on your phone. So if you go to the App Store, you can find Expo on there. And then once you're there, like once you install it, that's all you got to do. We'll get to a point where you just like scan a QR code and it'll just like open immediately on your app. So we'll show you how to do that when you get there, but all you got to do is find Expo on the App Store. I'm pretty sure it's on the Play Store as well. So yeah. Oh yeah, also, sorry, Expo, you also need to download with NPM. Let me reshare the slides. I'll pull up the installation slides really quick. Okay. Yeah, so you'll need to do npm install -g expo. So if you guys aren't familiar, like with the command line, you can just open up your command line and type this in. So on Windows, you can do like PowerShell. If you're on Mac, you just open up the terminal. Garrett, you're back, but your camera's frozen again. So, and your mic's also muted.
Okay, no camera. Am I audible?
You sound like a robot
I'm
still.
not audible.
It's kind of in and out. Is the app Expo Go? Yeah, the app's Expo Go. Gary, you there?
Hello?
Okay, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm there. How bad lag?
It could be worse. It's variable.
Okay. I'm just gonna restart the computer
Cool.
then.
Here, Garrett, for now I can share the slides until we get to the demo part, if that helps. All right, he might be gone. Oh, he's restarting, okay. Someone asked, where can you save the starter code to? Yeah, you can just save it somewhere on your desktop or like in your documents folder. It doesn't matter where you put it, but yeah, just download it. You can open it up in VS Code. So I can quickly just show how to do that really quick. Let me share my whole screen. Okay. To go here, if you have GitHub set up, you can do it with SSH or with HTTPS. If you haven't set up SSH keys, just select this one. Otherwise, you can just, yeah, do this one. So I use VS Code. So VS Code's like a pretty convenient code editor for me. If you don't have VS Code, it's okay. You can use like Atom or like really just any text editor you want to use. Let's probably open up my 120 homework. Oh, no, it's 134B. Okay, and then just like go to whatever directory you want to be in. Valorant is my primary ID. Yep. So in this case, you can just like CD into it. CD stands for change directory, and you just like do CD and then whatever name of the directory you want to go into. Yeah, I can't show the Minecraft base eventually. Yeah, but anyway, once you're in the directory you want to be in, you can just do Git Clone. do this. Just paste that link in there. Oh, Garrett, your webcam's working.
Okay. Is everything working?
It sounds like it's working.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay, I was just showing how to clone really quick, so still being productive.
Nice.
Yeah, once you do that, you can like open the folder. So, oh man, I got a bunch of junk in here. What's it called? React Native. Yeah, so select the folder. It'll open up in VS Code. Yeah, here's all the starter code. Can you go through the process really quick? Yeah, sure. Keenan, are you using VS Code or are you going to be using a different code editor?
Yeah, I'm using VS Code.
Okay, cool. So yeah, just to walk you through again, go here to like the top bar and click terminal, and then click new terminal. And what it will do is just like bring you to whatever directory VS Code set up in. So what you can do is just like, you could probably just do it wherever you have it set up. Just type Git Clone, and then that link I showed from before. So on this page where you have the actual repository, which I can like relink really quick in the chat. Go press the screen button, go to HTTPS, copy this link right here, and then go back to VS Code, type Git Clone, and then paste that in, press enter, and it should just like make a new version of that right where you have that directory. And then once you do that, you can just go to File, Open Folder, and then select the folder itself, and then just like open it right there. And that should set you up at least for the directory.
Somehow I'm getting an error. Like it says that the term Git is not recognized. Somehow.
Oh, you should probably download Git then.
Okay, I can go into a breakout room with you and we can get that set up really quick. I'll let Garrett like take over and move on to the next stuff just because we've been on this for like 10 minutes, I think.
Oh,
Yeah, Garrett, you can share your screen again.
all right, sure. I cannot share screen.
Oh shoot,
Make me a
you're not
co-host,
co-host anymore.
please.
My bad. All right, you're good to go.
Anyway, apologies for the technical difficulties. I assume that someone at Spectrum probably likes class components, so they decided to cut the internet. I said, anyway, so it's a framework for running React Native apps. Oh no.
Oh no.
Uh,
Here, Garrett, make me host again really quick. I accidentally gave you host permissions as well. Oh man, it's a buggy workshop. Okay.
Hey David, can you put me in a room with Keenan? I can have a look at the bug just so that you can stay in this room.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
okay, and can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
It is through.
All right, you know, I'm just gonna, Garrett, restart your router. I'll take over for a little bit because it's not working right now.
Right.
All right. Sorry about this, guys. Technical difficulties. You know how it is. Just like my boomer professors. All right. So anyway, assuming you guys have it all set up, you should just have like this screen set up on VS Code. Make sure you have Git like Expo installed. If not, then Shrevin can help you out once it gets back from the breakout room. Oh yeah, I shouldn't trash talk my internet provider because maybe they'll shut me down too. All right, cool. Just gonna get back to Garrett's slides. All right, cool. So, right, React Native components. So we kind of covered a lot of React components already. The important ones, kind of just showing the basics, but there's also some built-in components with React Native. So although like there's some core React components, React Native does things a little bit differently for the sake of it has to be native, right? So we're building for both Android and iOS, which means that we have to make special exceptions and do things a little bit differently than what we would for just like web applications by default. Okay, so here's a little bit of a basic conversion from React Native to like what web would be. So we have like view for native is basically just like a div on web. So it's like a divider in a sense. Scroll view is also very similar to divider, but you're actually able to scroll in that view. And think of like a view as like, I guess, whatever you're seeing on the screen is a pretty good way to think about it. So you have like certain, I guess, apps where like you're not able to scroll. I'm trying to think of like an example, but just think of like a static page like on an application that you can't really like scroll on and just like still. So when you try to like move your finger, it doesn't do anything. Compared to like a scroll view, like think about like Instagram's like main page where you're able to scroll through images. That would all be in a scroll view if it was built in React Native. And yeah, we also have like text, which is just like paragraph tags or any other text tags. Text input is also like input tags. There's a bunch of different ones, but you'll learn about them when you need them. There's just these simple translations that you'll kind of pick up over time. But that's the basics of the React Native components. All right, Garrett, you want to try talking and seeing if your internet's not crapping out again?
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Can everyone hear me? All right. So I'm not going to turn on my camera because clearly, maybe that's, I don't know. I'm not going to say anything bad about a certain internet provider anymore. Okay, so let me see. I still have the slides up, so I'm just going to share screen again. If I could have permissions, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. So we're here, Expo. So Expo provides a framework for running and developing React Native apps. So this means that you don't need to install any Android or iOS SDKs. So what does that mean? It means that this can compile Android and SDK like for you. You don't have to install like 20 gigabytes or whatever of Android and iOS SDKs. So that's a lot more convenient, I think, especially for smaller projects. Do we need Expo CLI? Yeah, you do. And the way you do that is through npm install -g. Okay, so run your app. So we're going to use the command yarn start or xstart, and a browser window should come up. So download the Expo app on your phone and then scan the QR code in the browser window, and it should open in your Expo app. So if you set up the sort of default app, I guess I can kind of demonstrate with this app right here. So if I just run yarn, I should probably zoom in to the terminal. I'm sorry. There we go. So in the terminal here, I'm going to run yarn, and it's going to install all of the. You can either do that or run npm install if you don't have install like that. Then I'm going to run yarn. If you don't have, then npm start would do the same thing. So yarn starts. What should happen is you should get this. Where do you install yarn? that is done with -G. Yeah. So we should get into QR scanner. Don't have app or not work thing running on an emulator if you have an OS, and it's going to try to open up. I think it's right here. Okay.
Well, nice. I guess he just crashed. All right. Well, I'll try to take over from there. Yeah. Sorry, guys. This is not supposed to happen. Let me pull up where he was at, and then we can keep going on. Yeah, poor Garrett. Definitely needs to upgrade his internet provider. All right, so right now I'm installing the Expo CLI. So if you guys haven't done that already, just type npm install -g Expo CLI. Also, like someone put in the chat before, if you need to install yarn still, just do npm install -g yarn. Same format. Garrett, I think you need to restart your router because
I already did, and it's still doing this.
you have like a hotspot on your phone.
I do. I don't have unlimited data, so I don't want to chew up like multiple gigabytes of chat and stuff.
Okay. Do you want to have me just do the coding and then you try
Uh,
talking?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with the code. I mean, there's all the steps kind of outlined in the, so I can try walking through that.
Okay, because you still sound like a robot right now, even with your webcam and your screen sharing off.
Okay, I'm gonna try it from microphone. Is this a little better or no?
Yeah, that sounds way better actually.
Okay.
Oh, well, it was for a
Right.
second.
I guess I'll try this. So if you have this slides up.
Nick has a good point, Garrett. If you want to open your phone and try to connect to the Zoom audio, that might be better.
Okay.
Yeah, well, his internet's probably still better than UCSD protected, so there's that at least. All right, so while Garrett's sorting that out, I'll quickly give like a quick overview of what the app structure actually looks like. So let me just start installing yarn while we're doing that. But we have a bunch of different folders. We've got assets, which are just like different pictures we'll be using for our app. So we have an adaptive icon, a favicon, which is like what's displayed when you open up the app, or icons, stuff that we'll be using later. We have one component, which is just notes. And so we kind of showed this before. If you look here, it's a little bit different from our examples, but we have a few extra lines. So specifically export default. These basically just say we're going to allow this component to be used in other places on our web application. And we have this functional component note, which returns very simple view with certain styles that we've imported from React Native. But don't need to worry too much about this if you're unfamiliar with it. We're going to be filling these blanks, so we have some props here as well. Title is like one of the props we'll pass in, so the title of the note, the content of the note, and what happens when you click on the note as well. And then, yeah, actually, so these are the styles right here. Kind of similar to like CSS, but a little bit different for React Native specifically. So we have styles for our containers specifically. This is basically just JSON. So container contains different attributes, such as like a border width, a color, the width of the container. So we just say 100%, so it fills up the entire box. And then padding, which is like adding a margin to the outside of our container. And then lastly, we have stuff for the header. So we're just specifying, okay, we want the header to be 24 pixels or size 24 in size. So that's the overview of our notes. We also have a few different screens. So our screens are where we're actually going to like be displaying our notes. We have an edit note screen, which in this case, we haven't implemented much yet, but we have another view which contains the styling. We'll be adding more to this in a little bit, but again, we have some styling for the container and the title, and then also for the home page, some other stuff as well. So this is like the main page of our app that'll open when we first display our application. We have a scroll view, so allowing us to scroll on the page with the nested view inside of it, just saying hello world. And so I think if we just if we do Expo start, it might actually allow us to run this off the bat. We actually need to do yarn install. Okay, yeah, one other thing too, once you have yarn ready, you have to do yarn install just to install these dependencies. So this might take a couple minutes to do, but once you do that, it will have everything you need to actually get started. Hey Garrett.
Now you want to hear me?
I can hear you, but your video is a little laggy.
Okay, I'll just turn off the video. Yeah. Calling from my phone, so let's see if that works.
Okay, you sound a lot better than on a computer.
All right, interesting. Yeah, I guess I won't share a screen then, because that might break it. So, where are you right now? You're
I'm installing the
installing stuff?
packages we need, but I walked through all the components, so I showed them like what note is, edit, then the edit note and the home screen as well.
Okay, nice.
So not really following the slides too much, but yeah, if you want to talk about maybe like app.js and like storage.js, I think that would be a good place to go from here.
Yeah, sure. So app.js, that just contains, that's the main component for the entire app. So think of React as like components within components. And the whole app is basically one giant component. Right now, all it does is show the home screen, but we're going to be changing it later to do more things. Right, and then storage.js, that is just sort of like a mock database. Just because I didn't want to have to like, create a MongoDB or like a SQL database just for demonstration purposes, right? And then having to like connect to it and do all that. So all this does is it just saves data to the local storage in key value pairs. And this is just like a mock database for demonstration purposes only. So yeah, that's all it is.
Cool. Okay. So I'll pull up the slides again, Garrett, if you want to go from here.
Sure, yeah. I'll try that. I really apologize for my bad internet.
Garrett, you good?
Yeah. You can hear me, right?
I didn't hear you before. I heard you say your internet was bad and then you cut out.
You can hear me, right? Yes?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I have trust issues now. All right. Okay, so here's the home.js component. Have you already explained this or no?
I explained like a very brief introduction. Maybe you want to like explain like maybe what safe area view is. I didn't
Yeah,
cover
sure.
like what that is.
We'll just go through the slides because it'll kind of highlight them.
Okay.
Right. So safe area view. Kind of laggy for me. So what safe area view does is that it keeps the content inside of the screen so that it doesn't sort of bleed out like past the boundaries of the screen. All right, so next, scroll view allows us to scroll the div. So that's important because if we have like a bunch of notes, then you know, it's important to be able to scroll and see all of them if we have a bunch of notes. Instead of CSS, this is how we style components. So we use this thing called Stylesheet.create, and then we write our styles in the form of JSON. In this case, the safe area style, what is safe area style is just flex one, and then container has all of its styles there. So this is just the same as all of the CSS properties, but using camel case, which means there's no space or dashes between the words, and the first letter of each word, except for the first word, is capitalized. So yeah, that's kind of how we do styles here. And then the way we assign the styles is through style equals, and then we just use the property there, styles.safe_area. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the home.js components.
Okay, can you see my screen, Garrett?
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Okay. Yeah, so let's go on to Node.js and start writing some code. So this is what we have right now for Node.js. And Gary, do you want me to just open VS Code and we can go from there? Or should I just go through the slides?
Yeah, you can do both if you want. Just go through the slides and then maybe write that code in VS Code.
Okay, cool. So
all the steps are outlined.
So right now we're just like displaying an empty view pretty much. We have it styled, but there's nothing inside of it. And so we have the title, the content, the onClick, like I mentioned before, and we have to actually like fill in this content and have some use for these props. So as you can see, now we can add a text component inside of this view. In this case, like we want to just display the title. The very simple like way to just put this in. So inside of our view tags, we added text. We specify the style is going to be styles h1, which we had down below in the style sheet. Like we showed before, you need these squiggly brackets to actually render what's inside of this variable or prop title inside of this text box, and then a closing text tag. So let's demonstrate what that would look like in here. So go to the home page. Not the home page, the Node.js page, I mean. Go here. We can paste in the text tag. And hopefully Expo is going to work. So if you just type Expo start, assuming everything works right. Okay, cool. Looks like it's working. So we have an Expo application already configured. And if you have the Expo CLI installed, you can just type Expo start. What it will do is open up like a local web server for your phone to connect to. And so one thing to keep in mind is your phone needs to be connected to the same Wi-Fi your computer's on. Otherwise, this won't work at all. And so the QR code kind of bugged here a little bit, but I probably shouldn't have stopped that. You can actually just press Q to re-render the QR code in the case that we have an issue like this where it kind of cuts off due to a command line issue. Yeah, let me know if you guys are able to get to this okay. And I'll demonstrate like on my phone what it'll look like. But as long as you have Expo installed and you get to the screen where it says it's like waiting to connect, then you should be good. Okay, don't break on me, please. Oh man, okay. I think Q is the. Okay, if you press question mark, it'll show more commands. Show project PRs, C. All right, so sorry, not Q, C. And now I have my phone up. Open your camera app and basically just scan your QR code. It'll say it wants to open an Expo Go. And so sometimes it takes a minute. It's still loading on my phone. Also because I'm not even on the Wi-Fi. That's why it's not working. So make sure you're on the Wi-Fi or it won't work. Okay, let's try this one more time on the Wi-Fi. Oh, I know why it's not working. I think this is the issue that some people are having. This is an outdated project. I just realized I'm having an issue with getting on my phone. It says it's because the SDK on this project is outdated. So I think as Trevor pointed out before, if you type Expo upgrade in your terminal. Yes.
I apologize for that. I haven't updated this example in a while.
Okay, so this might take a second to do, but if you just type Expo upgrade, it should fix that issue and you'll be able to open it on your phone. And thanks again, guys, for being patient. I know this has not been the smoothest workshop, maybe, but we'll still get through it. And you guys will definitely come out of the workshop knowing a bit more about mobile development with Expo. But as maybe you've learned so far, it's not always the cleanest process. I've made a mobile app in Expo before. Well, I'm working on one right now, actually. And there's always going to be little bugs like this that you'll run into. So that's just part of the life of being a software developer, I guess. Yeah, as Trevor said, Google's your best friend. Stack Overflow and Google, always there for you and no one else is. Yeah, you want to try rejoining your computer and seeing if it's any better now?
Yeah, I'll just keep the audio on my phone because I don't know. But does my video work?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll try screen sharing if that works.
Cool. All right, sounds good.
Please work. Please. Okay. Is this visible?
Yes.
And my audio is clear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll try to proceed then. Okay. So we are writing the Node Js components. So I'm just going to try to go through this step by step. Turn, view, styles. In. Right. So here we added in a text component. David, did you already explain this? Okay. But anyway, text, we're assigning it the H1 style, and then we're passing in the title prop as the text of this component.
I hate to say it, Garrett, but I think your screen's frozen.
Oh God. Okay.
It's okay though. I got it working, so I'm just gonna do it on my screen now.
All right. I really apologize.
Okay, so anyway, once you guys have Expo upgrade set up, I'm just gonna start it up on my phone. I don't have an emulator like Garrett does, but I'll try to show it through my webcam as best I can. You guys should be able to see it on your own phones if you have Expo Go installed. But yeah, I'll try to follow along as best we can. All right, so once you guys connect to it too, it should say like new update or like something's downloading onto your phone. You got to give it like a second to just download the stuff from your computer to your phone. And once it does that, it'll actually render the app. Yeah, so you see at the bottom it says building Java or bundling JavaScript. It's just like compiling it down to the iOS SDK, transfers that to your phone, and then it renders. So not the fastest process, but that's how it's done. Okay, almost there. All right, cool. So now we can see on my phone, we got hello world displayed. So sort of see it just at the top. We have nothing in our notes yet because we haven't made any note components yet. But as you can see here, we have the text hello world displayed with the proper styling we specified, which is just font size 36 and bold. So good first step. All right, so let's go back to the slides. We've already updated our node component. We just need to figure out how to render it. But we'll get to that after we finish building out the whole thing and writing out the component itself. So the next step we want to do after doing the actual title is define the content. So very simply, go back to your node component. We're going to make a new text component. And so you can just see the text opening and closing tags. If you have VS Code, it'll just do it automatically. Let me just check the chat. All right, and also do the styling again. And let me just quickly refresh myself with the slides. Oh, there's no styling, my bad. All right, in this case, we're just gonna render the content. So squiggly brackets, content, cool. And next up, we're gonna do the button itself. So I'm just gonna copy this from the slides directly. Feel free to do that as well. But our button is gonna have the title, edit none, note. So inside that button, it's just gonna have the text edit note. We're gonna have the on press, which basically means like when you press the button, it's gonna execute this function. So we passed in an on click callback function, which basically will say like, okay, when you click this button, we'll do this thing. We haven't defined on click yet, so don't worry about it. But once we do define that variable or that prop, we'll have that prop or that function be executed when we actually press the button. Okay. Cool. All right, and I think that covers most of the node component. All right, so here's a bit of a overview of what we just did. I know we spent a lot of time on this, but title and content are displayed as text components. The onClick is a function that we pass into the function later on, and the button is a new component. So that's like something that's built into React Native. It's a button that's native to the device, which means like when you open it on iOS or when you open it on Android, it's going to look different. You know, the typical like default iOS button, it'll show up on your screen. If you're using Android, it'll look like a typical Android button. All right, cool. And here's some example usage of like what a note could look like. So let's just copy this into our homepage. So just to quickly go over this, we have a component. So note is where we define the component that we just made. We're setting the title equal to CSE 140L. Content is pain. If you guys have taken that class, it's a painful class. If not, I'm sorry if you have to take it because it's going to be a rough one. But yeah, we have some function we haven't defined yet. In this case, I'm just going to leave on click blank, or maybe just do like an empty function, and we'll give this a shot and see if it works. Okay, so we have our view. Oh, We have our text, and we can just paste this component in right here. Cool. We don't have some function defined, so I'm just gonna do something blank. Yeah, I think that should work. All right, so if you're using Expo, it should also like automatically update on your phone. So if you look here, you can see this is what it looks like. It just says CSE 140L. The content is pane. Oh man, the blur in the background is not helping, but there's a button also that says edit. In this case, when I click it, it's not going to do anything because you haven't defined a function. But we'll get into that in a little bit with the edit node function. Is everyone following along all right? If anyone has any questions, feel free to speak up and I'd be happy to slow down and go into a bit more detail. All right, cool. Let's move on then. So we just made our first component, and here's some slides on like testing it out. We'll move on to edit Node.js. So this is the page or the function that's going to execute when we want to edit the note. So in this case, this is what the component looks like. We're defaulting, or we're exporting it, like I mentioned before, because we want to be using this in our home page. And we have in the prop navigation, just showing like what's going to happen when we click the edit note button. We're going to navigate to a different screen. In this case, we're not returning anything, but let's see what we're going to add to this function. All right, so here's where we apply what we learned about state before. When we want to update our title or when we want to update the content, we'll store that in some sort of state variable that's tracked so that when we want to update it, it will re-render on our screen and we can see like what the new title and what the new content would be. So let's start by adding these in. Feel free to copy paste this from the slides. You go to the edit note page, and at the top of your edit note component, keep using vim commands. Feel free to just paste that in right there. All right, as you can see, this is like blurred out a little bit. It says like title is declared, but it's not used, or its value is never read. It just means we haven't used this information yet, but we will be using that in just a little bit. Cool. Yeah, and if I'm going too fast, feel free to tell me to slow down, but let's move on. So in our safe area view, we're going to add 2 new inputs to update our actual note. We're going to have 2 text inputs. So we covered this before. This is like a React Native specific component that allows us to input text. And when we want to, or when we change that inputted text, it'll do something in our component. So just to break this down in a bit more detail, we're using this styling we specified that's already given to us, the placeholder. So whatever's going to be there before we edit it, it's just going to say no title. We have a value, which is the title. So what's going to be stored in there, or basically when you update this input, it's going to update title, or it's going to show title, sorry, in the text box when we do end up updating it. And then when we do change the text, what it does is it executes this function. So we have this text input, and this is a function, or this is a nested function right here with arrow notation. It'll run this function set title. So as we showed before, this is the actual function we'd run to update the title itself. So it takes in text and it updates the title with that text. So let's start and add this in. Okay. And then to go over the second one really quick, this is a different type. So one thing we can do is multi-line, which allows us to, instead of putting the input on one line, we can like press enter and it'll go to like the next line over, allowing us to display text on multiple lines. And our placeholder is just going to be no content. Value is also going to be the content. And yeah, very similar to our title. We're just going to be calling set content instead of set title in this case. All right. So now moving on, we're going to add the button lastly. So this is our save button, title save. When you press it, we don't need to pass any information to this button. All we need to do is save the data itself. So we'll go into that in just a little bit. I don't think we've implemented save data yet. Let's already given to us, but let's add that in. Okay, so this is implemented in the storage.js page we already were given. So in this case, we're just storing this in our local phone storage. Don't need to worry too much about this, but it just allows us to store this node information on our device. Another cool feature of React Native, it allows you to use your device's local storage. You don't need to use like a server or anything for that. Cool. All right, so here's pretty much our entire edit note function. And before we can actually implement that, we need to do a few more things. So skip through this. Yeah, so navigating between screens in React is a little bit different from doing it in React Native. This case, we'll be using the React Navigation library. These are just tools that allow us to switch pages on your phone, specifically in React Native. So we have two screens. We've got the home screen, which just has hello world, and then our displayed notes. And then we also have an edit note screen, which is going to open up whenever we want to actually change the note itself. So as a best practice, navigation should be handled at the screen level. So in this case, we don't want to, I guess, change our screens in the component itself. We want to handle that in the screens folder at the screen level right here. All right, so let's change app.js. So in this case, our app.js just has home. So all our app's going to do is render the home page. And in our home page, we have all this information about our view. We're going to do a change so we can actually navigate between our home page and our edit note page. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is create a stack navigator. What this basically allows us to do is stack our pages together. So you know when like you open a new page on an app on your phone, like you like swipe to the left and you're back at the page you were before. That's basically what a stack navigator is. It allows you to stack the pages on top of each other. So when you're done with the page, you just like press the X button, you swipe it away, and it'll go right back on the page that was there before. So we're doing that just this time in React Native. So you can paste that in. You create stack navigator. If you've done your yarn install, you should already have all this installed. But yeah. And then after you get the stack navigator set up, we're going to redefine our app to not just return home, but we're going to actually return a navigation container. And so we need this navigation container basically to tell our app that, hey, like we're going to be rendering multiple pages. These different pages are going to be stored, or I guess part of this navigation container itself. Okay, and then inside, you can see we have stack navigator. So just more nested information, just telling the app, like, where do we want to start off? In this case, our initial route name is going to be home. So we're going to start off with the home page. And if we wanted to start like the edit note page, for example, we could just change this to edit note. It knows because edit note is named inside of here. But yeah, we're saying we have two screens, our home screen and our edit note screen. And in order to show these screens, we're going to render these components, the home component and the edit note component. So whenever we open those screens, it'll open those components or render those components onto your device. Cool. So is everyone following along all right now? In just a few steps, we'll actually get to the place where we can open up the edit note screen. A little bit fast, but yeah, okay. I'll try to slow down a little bit. Let me just paste the code in to the Zoom chat in case you guys are falling a little bit behind. No, it's kind of a bit to type out. So this is what it should look like inside of your return statement for your app. Yeah, Garrett, feel free to chime in too if there's anything you want to add on.
Okay, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I guess I'm just not going to share screen because that might break it. I don't know. But yeah, yeah, Stack Navigator is just a stack of pages. The name on stack screen is referring to, it's kind of like the route name. So the name can be different from the actual name of the component.
Yeah, so this can be like anything you want it to be, but it just specifies for the stack navigator that like this is what we're calling it, right? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
cool. All right, so now we've made the screens, but we need to figure out how we can go between the screens. So let's go back to our homepage. I added this little bit. We might change that in just a sec, but we have our view just saying hello world. And we're going to make a quick change. So right now we don't have any prop, but we're going to swap it out. So we actually pass in the navigation prop, which allows us to navigate from our homepage to other pages on our app. So if you don't have this, it'll break when we're doing the stack navigation. So just make sure you pass in navigation as a prop. And in order to take advantage of the navigation, we can define a button that in the event that we press the button, it will use the navigation callback function that we passed in to navigate to the named edit note page that we defined inside of our app.js file. So in this case, our button's just going to be titled new note. When you press the button, it'll execute this arrow function that will navigate us to the edit note page. So let's copy paste this into our app. And once you do that, it should render on your device. So you should be able to press that button. So in this case, if you look at my phone, you can see there's a new, I'm just going to turn the background off. You can see my room. You should be able to see the button come up on your screen. How do I change my video while I'm doing this? All right, background. Cool. All right. So you should see this. It's going to be a new button that says new note. And if you press that, it'll just navigate you to a completely empty page. But that's where we want to start off for right now. Cool. All right. Oh, and also one thing I did completely different or did wrong is this is all supposed to be inside of your return statement, not just out in the open. So if you did that properly, oh, sorry, I'm using Vim commands again, I think. There you go. Okay. If you do this properly, you'll have this inside of your return statement in the safe area view. And if you just save that, oh, I think I broke the app.
You got some semicolons in there.
Oh, yeah. This is the floating semicolons. Do you think that's breaking it? Operation cannot be completed. Socket's not connected. Oh, did my phone disconnect? I'm just gonna reload the app really quick. Okay, cool. So now you can see no title, content, and then the save button, which you haven't actually done anything with yet. So if you click on it too, you can also just like type in whatever. So I'm just typing in random text. You can also do like multi-line content. So I'm just typing in random characters. You can see it goes on multiple lines and resizes as you go on. And then when you save it, it'll save it to your phone's local storage. Cool. All right, so got the edit note stuff working now. So let's go back and try to finalize this a little bit more. So we're back at our edit note file. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to our home screen whenever we finish saving the data. So in this case, the go back pops the screen from the stack. So kind of like swiping back on the screen, it will just go back to the page you were at before. And so we're just going to add this to our button so we can go back to the home screen and see our newly saved notes. Then we're also going to make some changes to our use state. So what are we doing? Route params allows us to pass.
So route params is this is essentially like setting, you can pass props through the route essentially. So kind of like how you do so with like, parameters in a web page. This is kind of the same thing. So route.params.title, you can pass the title to the edit note. And this is important because if we want to edit a note, right, like a note that already exists, we want the text to already be there, not have to type it out again. So yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah, and then this is like a abbreviated ternary operator, I think. Do you
Oh
know what
yeah, so I'll talk about the double question mark. It's a new thing, relatively new. Basically, if it's null, then it's like a null check. So if it's null, then it'll use whatever value is on the right. But otherwise, it'll just use the value on the left, basically. So it's like saying, okay, use this, but if it's null, then you use an empty string instead. So yeah, this is kind of shorthand for doing like question mark, and then the same variable again, and then colon, and then empty string.
Cool. So if you guys just overwrite your other header with that, that's all we got to do here. And then don't want to give this bug. Okay. Yeah, so I think this should cover all the changes we're going to do to edit note for now. All right, so now we want to tie everything back together. So displaying all the current notes onto the home screen. So in this case, we have been storing the notes. We're going to be storing them as a state variable. And we want to update those notes, going to be using useEffect. Cool. So this is what our home screen looks like. So open up your home.js file. I'm going to clear out what I added before. So just the note. We're just going to keep the button. And in this case, going to add some state to our home. In this case, we're going to be storing the notes that we have. So like we showed before, where you can use like numbers or booleans for use state, you can also store arrays in use state, which is like a really convenient feature when you want to store like lists of items, or we can even store like arrays of components, for example. Yeah, Garrett, were you gonna say something or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm just gonna say like this part is kind of, there's gonna be like a whole bunch of code that gets dumped in at once. So I'll just kind of explain each component because I couldn't find a better way to structure it because you kind of need all of it at once. So
Okay.
yeah, if you just go on.
Yeah, so I guess let's copy paste this in as we go. So I'm gonna add the state information for the notes, and then we'll also be rendering the notes below our button. So in this case, notes is actually just going to store like each of our notes components.
Yeah, so notes, this is an array of components. So components are kind of their own data type. You can think of them like that. So much like how you can have arrays of numbers or arrays of strings, you can have arrays of components. So that's what that is. We're literally putting down like a bunch of components in where, line 30 is, right?
Cool.
So yeah.
All right. So I think this is a part, like Garrett said, you don't need to understand everything going on here. But what we're doing is we're going to fetch the data from our local storage. And then we're going to, as Garrett said, do something with that data. Ooh, okay. So for now, let's just copy paste this get all data bit in, I guess for this last bit as well. And I think we'll cover what we're going to be doing with that data in just a sec.
Yeah, and get all data is async, which is why we need to do the .then. Because if you put code right afterward, then it won't necessarily wait for get all data to finish. So, but if we do .then it'll wait for that to finish and then run whatever is in the .then function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this might not be like the easiest like beginner concept to understand, promises and stuff like that. All you got to know is that it's basically waiting for this like data to be completely fetched, and then once it gets all that data, we're going to do something with it. We just have to wait for that data to be retrieved.
This part is kind of, yeah. So this is the rest of the owl situation. So I'll just let David copy this, and then I'll kind of explain each part. Right, okay. So what we're doing here is set notes, right? So we're essentially trying to set the state variable. And what are we setting it to? Well, we have our data, and our data is an array of key value pairs. And we're going to essentially take that array and map it to a set of components. In this case, that's what .map does in JavaScript. So .map takes in a function, and that function takes in a parameter, in this case, note. And note is each element in the array is the parameter. So for each note in the array, we're going to return a note component. And in that note component, we're going to set the title to be the first part of the key value pair, in this case, just 0. And then note 1 is going to be the content. And then on click, we're going to define the navigation for that. In this case, navigate. We're going to navigate to edit note. And then in the navigation, we're going to pass the props of title and content. So that's what that route.params was from before. It's going to pass in note 0 and note 1 as props to edit note. And then essentially all of that, if we go back out, data.map will return an array, and that array is going to be made of components. So once we're finally done with that, then that gets passed into set notes, and it'll call set notes and update the whole, it'll re-render the whole screen. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. That's a lot of code. Let me know if any of that is confusing.
Yeah, this is a lot to process at once.
I couldn't find a better way to explain it, honestly, because it's just one block of code.
Yeah, but basically the map is just going through everything that's like retrieved from our local storage, aka each of the notes, and then with the information that we stored locally, we're gonna actually like make a component out of that and show it to our users. So that's like very abridged explanation for it, but that's how it all comes together. So I think
Like 2 questions.
Sure.
yeah, sure.
So the first one is like, for use effect, I don't really know how it works in React Native because I'm new to it, but like, do we need a dependency array for it, or is it just gonna like?
Oh, right. So use effect, if there's no dependency, so there's two, it's really interesting. So if you don't specify a dependency, then this will just run every time the page is rendered. So in this case, every time you kind of go like refresh the page or whatever, it's going to run this use effect.
Okay.
But you can also do a different thing where you pass in an empty array, and that means that it'll only run on the first render.
Okay. So
yeah.
we want it to like run every render instead of just on the first render? Or
Yeah,
would
we want it to
just
run
be-
every time in case the data changes, right? Like if this were an actual app, the data, get all data might be different, right? The database might change. So you want to keep that kind of updated.
So what I don't really understand, like when would we like why would we need to render like multiple times? Because like every time you visit the home page, you would probably be like coming from another component that updated the notes, or you would be like first launching the app. So, like in what case would we need it to like, I guess, render multiple times?
We're not rendering necessarily multiple times. It's just, every time the page renders, essentially. So if you're coming back to the page, that's re-rendering the page, right? So so doing that, if we're coming back to the page, we want it to be updated.
Okay, and if we just passed in like an empty array, like for it to render once, then
It wouldn't necessarily
render
update.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think I kind of understand. And I think the second question I had was for when you're like passing props like to another screen, like the only way you can do it is through the navigation, like by passing it as another parameter there. Like there's no way you can like pass it into the actual component itself.
So if you want to navigate to a screen, right, that is actually done through navigation.navigate. And the React navigation library will handle that, like passing props for you. through the route params. So you can't necessarily navigate like directly to a component, if you know what I mean. You have to navigate to a route, and that route is specified, is mapped to a component in your app.js when you define the stack navigator, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think I get it. So, because like you can't pass the props in this case like directly, like using the traditional way, like to the component, because you're switching screens. So you have to
Yes.
pass
Yes.
it through the navigator.
Yeah, the navigator is what does the prop passing.
Okay.
So you have to
So
interface
then-
with that.
So then like in the whole example here, we're like passing props in two different methods, like one through just doing just doing it the normal way where you're passing it through like the Jsx component. And then the other way we also do is through the navigator.
Yeah. So in this case, note is just a normal component. We're not like navigating to a note, like, note is not its own page. So we're just passing it normally.
Okay. And then
But edit note is a page. So
got it. So whenever we switch pages, then we can't pass it the normal way through the JSX component, but instead we have to use the navigator.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All right, good questions.
Cool. All right, let's move on. So we're almost done here. Let's see. Already did this. All right. Oh, sorry. For each node of the database, it's stored in an array of title and content. So we're just storing the title of the note and the content of the note. And now we're like using that information. We're creating new note components every time we re-render the app, just to, I guess, like quickly store that data in like an efficient way. And then when we need to access that data, we can just make those new components really quick. And yeah, so that covers that. And so I think we got to change a few more things to get it working. Specifically, I think it was the save. What was it? Did it reset? I'm confused. Oh yeah, the on click. Okay, so when we
edit
do the
note?
notes on click, maybe it's all here. I could be tripping. Yeah. So I have it working on my phone. There's only one thing that is not working too well. So here is like a bunch of notes I did, and then if you press like new note, it crashes the app. Okay. But
I think I might know the issue. So if we go to edit note,
okay.
and you go to the top. So I think the issue is that route params is not necessarily defined. So you might need a question mark, like after the params, like question mark dot. Yeah.
Okay, let's try this again. All right, yeah, now it works. So Garrett's right. Remember that from the last one. And so if we make a new note, I'm just gonna title it note with like notes as the content. And now you can see it's the third note that's there. The only thing that's not working is like when I update the note. So like this is one of the standard notes I did. I'm just gonna say like yes as like the title of the note. If I save this, it doesn't edit the note, it creates a new one. Garrett, do you know why that happens?
Not exactly sure.
It could be that it's just not being cleared from our storage. Set item key values. How do we do the save data? Let's see. Edit
Because
note.
it worked for me. So
I think it's because when we save the note, we're updating the title. Yeah, so when we update the title, it's just like storing it as a new thing inside of our storage. Key value.
oh, maybe that is, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a key value pair issue. I think we could probably fix this by generating unique keys for each note.
That'd be like when you're mapping it, right? Like, do you like have to give each one a unique key when you're mapping it?
Yeah, you should.
Okay, yeah, I think I did that and that fixed the problem.
Okay.
Yeah. The way I set up the storage JS was just like super quick. Like that wasn't really the focus. That's why it's a little bit lazy.
Okay, well, yeah, if you want to fix that issue, that's how you do it. You just create a unique key mapping. But yeah, that's pretty much the app. So hope you guys learned a little bit from this workshop. I know it wasn't maybe the most organized, but I think we covered a lot. So I hope you guys took something away from it. And if you're interested in learning more, we'll do like a second version of this in a couple weeks. We're going to be building like a more complex app. I'm going over some more React Native features, but yeah, hope to see you guys there.
Yeah, and I do actually have a recording of this, of a version of this workshop from last year that I did, and it went way smoother. So I'll try to find that and paste the link in the Discord, in case anyone wants to see like, how this workshop would have gone, and kind of have a better resource than this recording. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and I apologize for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, thank you guys. I think we might do like a little after social too. If you guys want to hang around in Discord, we might play like Scriblio for a little bit. But yeah, feel free to stop by if you guys want to say hi, get to talk to us outside of a workshop setting. But yeah, thanks again, guys, for coming.
Can I ask like one more quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Like when you added the extra question mark for params, like why did you have to do that again? I didn't really get it because.
Oh, okay. So that's a null check. I should have explained it. So that's a null check. Params might be null, and we don't know that, right?
Oh, okay.
Title might be null, content might be null. So what that does is like, okay, if it's null, then just like don't bother checking and just return null. Because what it tried to do was it tried to look for title and content, and then params didn't exist, so then it didn't really know what to do.
And then you can do that. That's actually really cool. I never knew you could do that. Like, I guess that's just a JavaScript thing, right?
Yeah, it's a relatively new thing. And then the double question mark, someone asked that, double question mark basically is another null check. So it checks if route.params.title is null, and if it is, then just return an empty string. Otherwise, use the value. So it's basically a way of making sure that if it is null, it doesn't break the app, and it just gives us an empty string.
Oh, okay. And that's like a shortcut for like because like I think I usually see is like question mark and then the actual content again, and then colon and then null. So then this is just like shorthanding that, right?
Yeah, so like it would look something like this, what I just typed in chat.
Yeah, that's what I normally see.
Yeah, so this is obviously like kind of dumb if you're doing the same thing twice. So
yeah,
they decided to make this.
Oh, okay. And then the first one is you can put a question mark like while you're referencing like I guess this is probably like a key inside. You can do that like while you're like using dot notation to reference a key, like just throwing a question mark there if you're not sure if it's going to be null or not.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, that's really cool. I think every time I've had to do that, I just did conditional rendering, which is a lot more annoying, but
yeah, it's a lot more
good to know.
Double question mark equals. Oh yeah, I've seen that operator.
Nullish coalescing, baby.
Yeah, I love these new features.
Yeah.
Like how new are they? Like